The courthouse in Willow Ridge was not built for national attention. It was a modest brick building from the 1970s, square and unimaginative, with faded blue carpet and fluorescent lights that buzzed loud enough to make jurors complain. It usually handled traffic violations, custody hearings, the occasional bar fight. Nothing that required news vans or satellite dishes. But that morning, the courthouse grounds looked like a crime drama set. Cameras lined the sidewalks. Reporters leaned against railings rehearsing their lines. Police officers paced the entrance with the jittery focus of people who knew one wrong move would end up on the evening news. Inside Courtroom B, the air felt thick enough to chew. The crowd whispered in anxious waves. Neighbors, teachers, retired locals who had known the Hart family for years but never imagined the quiet, gentle mother at the center of such a ferocious mystery. The case had gripped the entire state. The disappearance of Emily Hart. Beloved nurse. Single mother. Gone without a trace. And the only person who might have witnessed what happened was her 3-year-old daughter, Lily. At the center of the courtroom, perched on a witness chair that looked more like a throne when compared to her tiny frame, Lily Hart sat incredibly still. Too still. Her little legs hung straight off the edge of the seat, not swinging, not fidgeting. She held her hands in her lap, fingers interlaced tightly, as though releasing them might make her fall apart. She wasn't crying. She wasn't blinking much either. But what struck everyone the most was the silence. Lily hadn't spoken since the night Emily vanished. Not a word. Not a sound. Some days not even a nod. Doctors said it was selective mutism triggered by trauma. Therapists said she'd talk when she felt safe again. Police hoped she'd talk before the trial ran cold. But the prosecution needed her testimony. They needed her tiny voice to break through the fog. And now, after months of dead ends, they had resorted to a desperate, delicate gamble. Bring her into court and pray something, anything, would unlock her memory. Judge Reynolds, a man in his late 60s with reading glasses that always sat crooked on his nose, watched Lily with a heavy expression that bordered on paternal concern. He had seen many tragic cases in his decades behind the bench, but this was different. A toddler, traumatized and silent, was about to decide the direction of a homicide investigation. He cleared his throat. "Let's take a brief recess," he said gently. "The child appears tired." But tired wasn't the right word. Lily looked hollowed out, like someone had drained the warmth from inside her and left behind only a shell. Her attorney leaned in close. "Lily," he whispered softly, "do you want some water? Do you want to stretch your legs?" No response. Not even a flicker in her gaze. Her eyes remained fixed on the empty air in front of her, as if she were watching a scene replay only she could see. Across the room, the defendant sat stiffly behind the defense table. Mark Durnell, 32, well-groomed, in an expensive charcoal suit that looked out of place in this modest courthouse. Emily's ex-boyfriend, charming to some, unsettling to others. He maintained a calm, innocent expression, but every so often the muscles in his jaw twitched. His attorney kept leaning toward him, reminding him to look compassionate, not annoyed. Prosecutors were running out of options. They exchanged urgent whispers. "We should postpone." "We can't postpone." "She's not responding." "She won't." Then the door opened. It wasn't the entrance the judge usually used, nor the main doors the public entered through. It was the small side door used mostly by personnel. The hinges squeaked loudly, slicing through the murmur of the courtroom. Everyone turned. Officer Daniels stepped inside, shoulders squared, uniform crisp, but eyes filled with caution. And beside him, trotting with silent confidence, was his K-9 partner, Ranger, a broad-chested German shepherd with intelligent amber eyes. His steps were steady, controlled, every muscle alert. Reporters leaned forward. The judge narrowed his eyes. "Officer Daniels," he said slowly, "why is the dog here?" The officer wet his lips. "Your Honor, you asked us to bring anything that might help the child feel comfortable. Ranger worked with the search team. We thought she might recognize him." A murmur swept the room. Some disapproved. Some were curious. But nobody objected. Except one person. Mark Durnell stiffened instantly. His fingers curled. His eyes darted toward the dog with a flash of something: fear, rage, memory. It disappeared too quickly to be certain. Officer Daniels approached carefully, keeping Ranger at heel. "If it's allowed," he said, voice respectful, "I'd like to let her see him from a distance, no closer than you permit." The judge hesitated. His gaze moved from the dog, to the silent child, to the desperate prosecution. "Proceed," he said. Ranger walked in with the kind of presence that made people instinctively sit straighter. He wasn't threatening, not in the way a snarling dog might be, but powerful, grounded, aware. Lily remained motionless. But then, barely noticeable, barely there. Her head tilted. Her eyes blinked. Not once, not twice, but repeatedly, as if reality was snapping into focus. The prosecutor whispered urgently to her assistant, Look at her, she's reacting." Officer Daniels stopped 10 feet away from the witness stand. Ranger sat. The courtroom held its breath. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Lily slowly lifted her gaze, her pupils widening, her small fingers unclasped, trembling slightly as they loosened. Her lips, usually pressed together in a tight, pale line, relaxed. The shift was so subtle that most people missed it, but her attorney noticed immediately. "Lily," he murmured, his voice catching. The toddler's eyes locked onto Ranger. Not on Officer Daniels. Not on the judge. Not on the crowd. Only the dog. It was like she was seeing the first familiar thing she had seen in months. Ranger's ears perked. His posture changed, relaxed, softened, like he recognized her too. "That's when it happened." Lily leaned forward just slightly. A movement so fragile it could have been a trick of the light, but her attorney gasped quietly. Her mouth opened. A breath escaped her, soft, shaky, but purposeful. Officer Daniels heard it. He froze. His face tightened with disbelief. He lowered himself slightly and whispered, "Lily, sweetheart, what was that?" But Lily wasn't looking at him. She stared at Ranger with eyes that shimmered, not with tears, but with memory. Then she whispered something again, only 2 faint syllables, too soft for the microphones, too soft for the attorneys, too soft for the cameras. But loud enough for Ranger. The German shepherd stood abruptly, muscles tensing, ears sharp. Officer Daniels' jaw fell open. And the entire courtroom leaned forward, breathless. The courtroom was silent, taut as a wire, every heartbeat echoing in the hushed chamber. Cameras zoomed in, reporters froze mid-scribble, and even the judge leaned forward, fingers resting on his gavel as though holding it could somehow steady the sudden tension in the air. All eyes were on Lily, the tiny, silent girl whose world had been upended months ago, and the dog standing before her, Ranger. He was a German shepherd bred for police work, trained to detect, track, and protect. His fur gleamed a dark sable in the morning light streaming through the courthouse windows. Each movement he made was deliberate. His muscles flexed subtly under his coat, a coiled strength that seemed to radiate quietly but undeniably. But what held the room captive was Ranger's size or training. It was the connection he shared with the child. Lily didn't blink. She didn't shift. She simply stared, eyes wide, heartbeats racing beneath the fragile skin of her small frame. It had been months since she had spoken to anyone about the night her mother disappeared. Months since she had uttered a word beyond a murmur. Months spent locked inside a silence so thick therapists called it trauma-induced mutism. And yet, at that moment, Lily seemed aware of everything. Every nuance of Ranger's posture, every flick of his ears, every muscle tensing in anticipation. Officer Daniels, her handler, crouched slightly beside the dog. His uniform was immaculate, but his hands shook, gripping Ranger's leash with more tension than was necessary. "Easy, boy," he whispered. Ranger's amber eyes flicked toward him for a fraction of a second, then returned to Lily. It was clear he understood the stakes. He had been on search missions, crime scenes, and high-stress operations, but none of them had prepared him for this courtroom. The judge, normally a pillar of stoic authority, cleared his throat nervously. "Is the child," he paused, scanning Lily, "comfortable?" Lily didn't respond, she didn't even flinch. But there was a subtle shift in her posture, an almost imperceptible lean toward Ranger. It was the first sign of recognition, a flicker of trust. The prosecutor, a determined woman named Claire Benson, whispered urgently to her assistant. "She's responding. Look at her eyes. This could be it." The defense attorney, on the other hand, looked alarmed. Mark Durnell, sitting stiffly behind the table, tensed noticeably. His hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles whitened. His eyes darted nervously between Lily and Ranger. Something about the dog unsettled him. He had seen Ranger before, not in court, not publicly, but somewhere, and he did not like what he remembered. Officer Daniels took a slow, measured step forward. "Ranger," he commanded softly, "sit." Ranger obeyed instantly, his training precise, but he remained rigid, alert. It was as if he sensed something deeper beneath the child's gaze. He sat, head high, eyes locked on Lily, nostrils flaring ever so slightly. Lily's lips parted again, tiny and trembling. She exhaled a whisper, barely audible to anyone but the officer. "He remembers." The words, so soft they might have been dismissed as imagination, struck the room like a bolt of lightning. Officer Daniels froze. Ranger's ears perked. The dog's tail stiffened slightly, brushing the floor with a faint thump. The air in the courtroom seemed to ripple. Claire leaned forward, heart racing. "He remembers what?" she murmured, though she already had a terrifying suspicion. Mark Durnell shifted in his seat, eyes widening ever so slightly, a twitch at the corner of his mouth betraying panic he had not expected anyone to notice. Lily, encouraged by Ranger's unwavering gaze, whispered again, this time louder, more deliberate. "Show them." Every head in the courtroom turned. The words hung in the air like a warning. Ranger's body stiffened further. Officer Daniels' grip on the leash tightened almost imperceptibly, but he did not pull the dog back. Ranger took a deliberate step forward, his paws silent against the polished courtroom floor. A murmur ran through the audience. Cameras zoomed in, reporters scribbled furiously, but no one spoke. The tension was nearly suffocating. Lily's tiny hand rose, finger pointing straight at Mark Durnell. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, bore into him with a clarity that defied her age. Ranger stopped 3 feet from the defense table. His gaze never wavered. He circled the table slowly, deliberately, each paw step measured, almost ceremonial. Mark's breathing hitched. His jaw clenched. His hands shook, still gripping the edge of the table. He opened his mouth to speak but stopped, as if the sight of the dog had silenced him before words could escape. The judge, sensing the rising tension, slammed his gavel once. "Order!" His voice cracked slightly, betraying the pressure he felt. "Order in the court." The murmurs quieted, but the courtroom did not return to calm. Something was happening here that nobody had expected. Ranger, trained to respond to commands and cues, was acting on instinct. And instinct that day told him to focus entirely on the girl and the man she was silently accusing. Lily's tiny voice rang out again, stronger this time. "He tried to help." The prosecutor leaned forward. "Tried to help who, Lily?" She swallowed hard, little shoulders trembling, but her eyes never left Ranger. "Ranger, he tried to save Mama." A collective gasp rose from the courtroom. People leaned forward in their seats. Mark Durnell's face drained of color, his lips parting in a gasp that went unnoticed amidst the murmurs of shock. Ranger took another deliberate step, placing himself directly between Lily and the defendant. The dog's body was a barrier, protective and powerful. His eyes seemed to communicate understanding, loyalty, and a deep memory of that fateful night. Officer Daniels whispered urgently, "Ranger, stay with her, protect her." The German shepherd obeyed, his posture lowering slightly but his gaze never leaving Mark. His entire being radiated silent warning, "Do not move, do not approach." Mark Durnell shifted in his chair, attempting to mask the terror creeping across his features. He opened his mouth again, but words failed him. For the first time, he looked small, exposed, and vulnerable in a way no one had seen before. Lily, encouraged, leaned forward slightly. Her tiny voice, steady and deliberate now, cut through the courtroom like a blade. "He hurt Mama." The room went utterly silent. Even the buzzing fluorescent lights seemed to dim under the weight of her words. A reporter gasped audibly. The judge leaned back in disbelief. The courtroom stenographer paused mid-keystroke. Officer Daniels whispered to no one in particular, voice tight. "He remembers everything now." Ranger, as if confirming, let out a low, deep growl, not threatening the child, but warning, a signal that he carried memory, evidence, and truth in ways that no human witness could replicate. Lily's hand trembled slightly as she rested it on Ranger's head. The German shepherd leaned into her touch, gentle, aware, as if acknowledging her bravery. Claire Benson, the prosecutor, whispered to her colleague, "We've never had a witness like this, ever, a child and a dog telling the truth together." Mark Durnell's attorney was frozen, unsure how to proceed. He knew instinctively that this was no ordinary witness. Every legal strategy they had prepared felt suddenly irrelevant in the face of this silent partnership between girl and dog. Judge Reynolds cleared his throat. "We will proceed carefully. The child is clearly engaged. Officer Daniels, please ensure the animal remains calm, but allow her space." Officer Daniels nodded. Ranger sat, tail low but eyes blazing, muscles coiled like springs. He was ready, in every way he could be, to reveal the truth as he remembered it. Lily, seated on the edge of her chair, looked at Ranger. She whispered something only he could understand. He twitched, a signal of recognition, and stepped closer, not threateningly, but with purpose. The courtroom leaned forward as one. Something was about to happen, something no one could anticipate, and Lily's tiny words had unlocked it. The courtroom's atmosphere had shifted. What had started as a tense, fragile gathering of reporters, lawyers, and neighbors had become a theater of anticipation, each breath in the room heavy with the weight of unspoken secrets. Lily Hart sat perched on the witness chair, fingers gripping the edge like a lifeline. Ranger, the police dog, remained close by, sitting alert but calm, a living shield between her and the man whose presence made her body tremble without sound. Every muscle in his powerful frame seemed to hum with tension, aware that something profound was about to unfold. Officer Daniels whispered to Ranger, "Easy, easy, boy." But the dog's amber eyes never left Lily. The faint twitch of his ears suggested a recognition beyond human understanding, as if he could see not only her fear, but also the memory buried inside her. The judge leaned forward, clearing his throat. "Miss Hart, are you ready to speak?" The words hung in the air, heavier than any gavel. Everyone, reporters, jurors, attorneys, waited, knowing that this moment could redefine the entire case. Lily's eyes darted toward Ranger. She blinked once, then twice, as though seeking courage in the loyal gaze of her four-legged companion. Then it happened. Her lips parted. A soft, trembling sound escaped, a sound that had not been heard since the night her mother vanished. It was barely above a whisper, almost lost amid the rustling papers and the low hum of the fluorescent lights. "He remembers," she breathed. The words, fragile as they were, sent a ripple of shock through the courtroom. Officer Daniels froze, heart pounding. Ranger stiffened, ears pricked, tail low but rigid. The dog's body language mirrored the weight of the girl's words, tense and ready, as though confirming that the memory was true, vivid, and dangerous. Claire Benson, the prosecutor, leaned closer, heart hammering in her chest. She had heard many witnesses recount traumatic events, but never anything like this. Not a 3-year-old, speaking through silence and fear, unlocking a truth that had been hidden for months. "Lily," Claire said softly, careful not to startle the child. "What do you mean he remembers?" Lily's small fingers curled around Ranger's fur. She drew a shaky breath, her voice still barely audible, yet filled with unshakable certainty. "Ranger, he remembers Mama." The courtroom went still. The sound of shuffling papers, the hum of cameras, even the scribbling of reporters, all vanished. Time seemed to stretch, waiting for the child to continue. Mark Durnell's face drained of color. A flicker of panic passed across his eyes, though he tried to mask it with forced composure. His palms were damp, gripping the edges of the table so tightly that his knuckles were white. Something about those words, "the dog remembers," made him falter, revealing a crack in the facade he had so carefully maintained. Lily's tiny hand rose, pointing not at the floor, not at the people seated around her, but at the defendant. Her lips trembled and she drew in a deep, hesitant breath. "Show them." A shiver ran through the courtroom. Ranger's ears twitched, his body tensing further. Officer Daniels gripped the leash lightly, careful not to constrain the dog. Ranger didn't need guidance. He understood the command perfectly. The dog stepped forward, deliberate, measured, circling the table with a slow, precise grace. Mark Durnell's attorney scrambled to intervene. "Your Honor, this is inappropriate. The child cannot." "Silence," the judge barked, gavel striking with authority. "Let her speak." Ranger sat down deliberately, his gaze locked on Mark Durnell. The dog's presence was magnetic, almost supernatural. The courtroom could feel it. A silent bond between child and canine, a living witness who carried more memory than any human could. Lily's voice grew slightly stronger, steadying as she found courage in Ranger's unwavering focus. "He tried to save Mama," she said, pausing to inhale a shaky breath. Claire leaned forward, heart racing. "Tried to save her. Lily, tell us what happened." Lily swallowed hard, eyes glistening with a mixture of fear, sadness, and the faintest glimmer of determination. "Ranger tried to bite him. He tried to stop him." The words hit the room like a thunderclap. A collective gasp rose from reporters and spectators alike. Mark Durnell's face went pale, lips parting slightly, as if his voice had been stolen by the weight of the accusation. Officer Daniels whispered under his breath, his voice trembling, "He remembers everything." Ranger's low growl underlined the statement, confirming the child's words. The defense attorney's protests were now feeble, drowned by the growing tension. "Objection! This is hearsay, the dog." Judge Reynolds slammed his gavel again. "Objection overruled. The witness is speaking. Proceed." Lily took another hesitant breath. "Mama," she told Ranger to run, to get help. Her voice was breaking now, tiny sobs threatening to escape, but she continued. I was in the car. He put me there." The courtroom froze. The words hung in the air, chilling everyone. The simple, innocent phrasing of a 3-year-old now carried the weight of accusation, memory, and fear. Reporters leaned forward, capturing every tremor of her voice. Jurors exchanged anxious glances, realizing that a child's truth could change everything. Mark Durnell's composure cracked. His mouth opened, then closed. His fingers fidgeted nervously. Ranger's gaze never wavered. Every muscle in the dog's body seemed to tense, a silent warning as if saying, "Do not lie now. She sees everything." Lily's tiny voice rose again, this time with growing courage. "He hurt Mama." The room exhaled in disbelief. Officers shifted, Pens dropped. Reporters gasped. Claire's hands trembled as she took notes. Every word from the child was now a piece of evidence more powerful than she could have anticipated. Mark's face went slack. The mask of confidence he had worn throughout the trial slipped away, replaced by raw fear and panic. The tension between child, dog, and man was almost unbearable, electric in the air. Then Lily whispered, eyes locked on Mark Durnell, "And he's lying right now." A hush fell over the courtroom. Even the judge leaned forward, eyes wide. The weight of the child's words, delivered with the authority of truth far beyond her age, pressed down on everyone present. Ranger let out a low, warning growl. His stance was firm but controlled, a living testament to Lily's claim. The dog, trained to detect danger, to sense fear, and to remember critical details, now stood as a silent witness alongside the child. Mark Durnell's attorney tried to intervene, voice rising in desperation. "Your Honor, this is inadmissible, the dog." Judge Reynolds held up his hand. "Silence, let the child finish." Lily's small frame trembled as she drew a deep breath. Then, with astonishing clarity, she pointed at Mark. "Ranger, bit your hand." The courtroom collectively froze. The defendant's right hand, wrapped in a plain gauze bandage, trembled. Beads of sweat formed on his brow. His composure crumbled as Claire leaned forward, realizing the significance of what Lily had just revealed. Officer Daniels whispered almost to himself, "That's it, the memory, it's all coming back." Mark Durnell's face turned ashen. His mouth opened as though to deny the accusation, but no sound came out. Ranger let out a low growl again, affirming Lily's words. The judge leaned back, adjusting his glasses, face pale. "This court is witnessing something extraordinary," he said. Lily looked at Ranger, tiny fingers brushing his fur, and whispered softly, "Good boy." Ranger lowered his head, a silent acknowledgement of loyalty, courage, and shared memory. The courtroom sat in stunned silence, realizing that a 3-year-old child and a police dog together had begun to unravel a truth long buried. And in that moment, everyone knew nothing in this case would ever be the same. The courtroom was electric, every heartbeat echoing as though time itself had slowed. 3-year-old Lily Hart, pale but resolute, sat gripping Ranger's fur, eyes locked on the German Shepherd with a focus that defied her age. The entire room held its breath, witnesses, jurors, reporters, even the judge, suspended in a moment of tense anticipation. Ranger's amber eyes burned with intelligence and recognition. He had tracked the events of that fateful night, sensed fear and deception, and now in the courtroom he responded to Lily's silent command. The dog's body was taut, muscles coiled like springs, every movement deliberate, calculated, purposeful. Officer Daniels whispered softly, hand gently resting on Ranger's harness. "Steady, you know what to do, boy." Ranger didn't move immediately, only inhaled deeply, nostrils flaring, eyes never leaving Lily. It was a silent conversation, a connection forged in crisis, trust, and memory. Then Lily pointed at Mark Durnell, her tiny finger trembling slightly. Ranger reacted instantly. He stepped forward, not aggressively, but with a gravity that filled the room with silent warning. Every paw step he took seemed to echo like a drum beat, deliberate, measured, a rhythm of revelation. He circled the defense table once. Twice. Mark's face shifted from pale to ashen. He tried to sit upright, but the dog's gaze pinned him like a hawk spotting prey. His breath quickened. The courtroom felt the surge of fear radiating off him like heat from a fire. Ranger stopped in front of Mark, lowering his head just slightly, almost bowing, and let out a low, deliberate growl that resonated through the wooden floor. It wasn't a growl of threat toward Lily. It was a warning aimed squarely at the man who had so carefully concealed his truth. Gasps rose from the audience. Reporters scribbled furiously, trying to capture every tense moment. Claire Benson, the prosecutor, leaned forward in disbelief and awe. It's like he's signaling something," she whispered to her assistant. The defense attorney rose abruptly. "Your Honor, this is absurd. This dog cannot be allowed to." "Silence," Judge Reynolds barked, slamming his gavel. His voice was strong, but there was an edge of disbelief, a recognition that something extraordinary was unfolding. "Let the witness continue." Lily's lips trembled as she whispered, eyes fixed on Ranger. "He hurt Mama." The courtroom inhaled collectively. Mark Durnell's jaw tightened, but it was no longer just nervousness. It was guilt, raw and unmasked. Ranger's tail stiffened slightly, brushing the polished floor. His ears were pricked, nostrils flaring as though he were sniffing the very truth out of the air. The German shepherd's instincts were clear. He had witnessed, smelled, and remembered events that no human could. His reaction wasn't random, it was methodical, precise. Ranger began circling Mark again, slow, deliberate, one paw step at a time, each movement a silent accusation, a reenactment of what had happened. The jurors leaned forward, eyes wide. Some whispered to neighbors, but their voices were hushed by fear, curiosity, and disbelief. Even the seasoned courtroom staff could not look away. Mark shifted in his seat. "This is ridiculous. That dog," he stammered, attempting to regain control of the narrative, but Ranger's presence was undeniable. The growl, the gaze, the deliberate circling, it was more than a dog's instinct. It was truth manifest in muscle and fur. Ranger stopped directly in front of the defendant, body low but tense. He sat, head held high, eyes fixed. The subtle signals, learned over years of training and experience, were impossible to ignore. Officer Daniels knew it immediately. Ranger was giving a formal alert, the kind of signal reserved for confirmation of human deception and trauma. Claire leaned closer, whispering into her assistant's ear. "He's giving a full alert. That's the highest level of behavioral recognition we can get from a K9. The dog knows." The courtroom was hushed except for the soft whimpers Lily let out. She was trembling but steady, understanding instinctively that Ranger was revealing what she could not yet articulate in words. Judge Reynolds adjusted his glasses. "Officer Daniels, is the dog trained for criminal alerts?" "Yes, Your Honor," Daniels replied, voice tight. "Ranger has been trained for tracking, detection, and behavioral alerts. He reacts when he identifies a person associated with traumatic events, or when he detects the scent or signs of wrongdoing." The courtroom shifted in their seats. The idea that a dog could corroborate a child's memory, especially a memory so sensitive, so harrowing, was almost too much to process. Mark Durnell's face twitched. He looked around, desperate for reassurance, for an escape. His attorney was frantically gesturing, but the scene had slipped beyond their control. Ranger was in command now, silent but unyielding, channeling the memory of that night. Lily's small voice rose, a whisper carrying across the room. "He put me in the car." The sound of her words, barely audible, carried the weight of months of terror. The jury shifted uncomfortably, unable to ignore the implications. Ranger's stance mirrored her statement, as if confirming her words in ways no human witness could. Mark Durnell's face turned red, then ashen. He attempted to speak. "That's not true, she doesn't." Ranger's growl cut through him like a knife. It was low, deliberate, controlled, an unambiguous statement. "Do not lie, we know." Mark's eyes flicked to the officer. "Remove that dog," he demanded, but his voice wavered, betraying panic. Officer Daniels shook his head, calm but firm. "Ranger stays. He's providing evidence, Your Honor. He's part of the investigation." The defense attorney collapsed back into the chair, face pale. "This is unprecedented," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Ranger stepped closer, positioning himself between Lily and Mark with precision. The subtle stance, a dog trained for protection, was unmistakable. He was shielding her, but he was also pointing. The room could feel it. An accusation without words, a judgment without trial. Lily, sensing the unspoken communication, whispered, "Ranger, bite hand." Officer Daniels froze. Ranger's ears perked. A slight twitch in his shoulder signaled he remembered precisely. The German shepherd's memory, the instincts embedded through months of training and nights spent at crime scenes, was unfolding in real time. Mark's hands shook. He gripped the edges of the table, knuckles white. Ranger's gaze never wavered. Lily's small finger, trembling but steady, pointed straight at him. The room was suspended in disbelief. A 3-year-old child and a dog were now laying bare the hidden truth of a crime that had confounded authorities for months. Judge Reynolds leaned forward, resting his elbows on the bench. This is extraordinary," he said, voice low but carrying authority. "We will allow the testimony to continue, and we will do so with the utmost care." Lily exhaled, tiny shoulders quivering, then leaned against Ranger for reassurance. "He hurt Mama," she whispered again with conviction. Ranger growled softly, tail flicking once, a signal of affirmation, a confirmation that Lily's memory and the dog's recollection were aligned. Mark Durnell's panic became palpable. He opened his mouth, attempting to deny, to lie, but Ranger's presence, the child's unwavering gaze, the courtroom's collective attention, held him captive. Every instinct he had to protect himself was powerless against the silent but undeniable force before him. Ranger's final signal was subtle but unambiguous. A low, deliberate sniff, a slight forward lean, a steady, unwavering stare. He was confirming the child's testimony and the memory of that night. The room exhaled collectively. Reporters scribbled notes with renewed urgency. Jurors leaned forward, struggling to reconcile what they were seeing with what they had learned in law school or in life. Witnesses and officers exchanged glances of disbelief. Claire Benson whispered to her assistant, voice shaking slightly, "This is the strongest form of testimony I've ever witnessed, and it's coming from a 3-year-old and a dog." Lily's small voice, though barely audible, carried an unshakable power. She turned slightly to Ranger, brushing her tiny hand across his fur, and whispered, "Good boy." Ranger lowered his head slightly, a silent acknowledgement, a bond of trust and shared memory that no courtroom protocol could define. The courtroom leaned in as one, caught between awe and horror, knowing that the truth was no longer hidden. The courtroom had transformed from a mere theater of legal procedure into a stage of raw human emotion. Every eye was fixed on Lily Hart, perched on her oversized witness chair, trembling slightly but resolute. Beside her, Ranger, the German shepherd, sat like a statue, alert, protective, and impossibly aware of every nuance of the unfolding drama. Months of silence had been broken in the past few minutes. Lily's words, so fragile, so precise, had begun to reveal a story no one had dared imagine. Now the air in the courtroom was thick with tension, anticipation, and disbelief. Officer Daniels crouched near Ranger, speaking softly, "Steady, steady, boy. Let her lead the way." Ranger's amber eyes flicked toward Lily as if saying, "I've got you. Go ahead." Lily swallowed, trembling, her tiny hands clenching the edge of the chair. Tears glistened in her eyes, threatening to spill, but she forced herself to continue. Every word was a battle, every phrase a reclaiming of courage stolen from her in the months since that night. He made me go into the car," she whispered. Her voice was quivering, barely audible, yet each word resonated through the silent courtroom like a gunshot. Mark Durnell's composure was unraveling. He tried to maintain a facade of calm, but the subtle tremor in his fingers, the tightening of his jaw, the shallow breaths betrayed his panic. His eyes darted from Lily to Ranger, as though seeking some escape from the damning tableau the two of them presented. Claire Benson leaned forward, heart pounding. "Lily, do you remember what happened after that?" she asked gently, careful not to frighten the child. Lily nodded slightly, eyes never leaving Ranger. Her voice quavered but carried with clarity. "Ranger tried to bite him. He tried to save Mama." Gasps erupted across the courtroom. Some reporters instinctively leaned forward, scribbling notes at a frantic pace. Jurors exchanged tense glances, the weight of a child's testimony settling like a heavy curtain over them. The defense attorney sprang to his feet. "Your Honor, this is—" "Sit down," Judge Reynolds barked, gavel slamming. His voice carried authority, but there was a tremor of awe in it. "Let the child continue. This testimony is admissible." Mark's face paled further. He shifted in his chair, hands gripping the table as though he could physically hold himself together, but Ranger's intense gaze pinned him, rendering every defense moot. Lily's lips trembled, her small shoulders shaking. He hit Mama. And she tried to push him, but she paused, shivering visibly, before completing the sentence in a whisper that sent a chill through the room. But he wouldn't stop. The courtroom gasped again. The air seemed to vibrate with tension. Officer Daniels' hand tightened on Ranger's leash, though the dog remained calm, unwavering, a silent sentinel of truth. Claire leaned closer, heart hammering. "Lily, what did you do?" The child drew in a deep, trembling breath. "Mama, she told Ranger to run, to get help, and I was left in the car." Her voice broke slightly, tears spilling down her cheeks now. She wiped them with the back of her hand, trembling, yet refusing to look away from Ranger. Mark Durnell's breathing grew ragged. He opened his mouth, trying to deny, to regain control, but Ranger's low growl froze him in place. The dog's body language, coiled and protective, radiated an undeniable truth. The events Lily spoke of were accurate. Ranger shifted slightly, moving to stand partially between Lily and Mark, as if physically blocking the defendant's attempts to lie, to rewrite history. The courtroom collectively leaned forward, captivated by the unusual yet compelling dynamic. Lily's voice rose again, small but resolute. He hurt Mama, she fell, and I couldn't move." A shudder ran through the jury. Every juror was acutely aware that the narrative emerging from this tiny girl and a trained police dog was unlike anything they had seen before. The combination of innocence and instinct had created a new form of truth, one impossible to ignore. Claire whispered to the judge, voice tight with tension, This is beyond testimony. It's almost visceral." Judge Reynolds nodded slightly, face pale. "I am aware, Ms. Benson. Proceed." Lily's small hands clutched Ranger's fur, seeking comfort. The dog leaned slightly into her touch, as if reinforcing the bridge between memory and safety. "Ranger, he pulled me out of the car." Her voice gained a fraction of strength, emboldened by the presence of her loyal companion. The audience stirred with a mixture of awe and horror. Reporters scribbled notes feverishly, some whispering to each other, others craning to see the expressions on the faces of those involved. Even the bailiffs exchanged glances, uneasy at the raw intensity of the scene. Mark Durnell's eyes flicked to Ranger again, the dog's gaze unwavering. Panic had overtaken all attempts at composure. His hands shook uncontrollably now, and his breath was uneven. Ranger's subtle growl intensified, almost imperceptibly, as if urging him toward honesty or preparing the courtroom for the inevitable. Lily took another shaky breath. He tried to stop Ranger, but Ranger, he didn't. He kept coming, and he bit him. The statement hung in the air, charged with shock and anticipation. The defense attorney stammered at a loss for words. "Your Honor, this is—" Judge Reynolds slammed his gavel, eyes sharp. "This child is speaking. The dog is trained. We will hear the truth." Officer Daniels whispered softly, kneeling near Ranger. "That's it, boy. She's telling the story. Stay with her." Ranger's amber eyes softened slightly, almost as if to reassure Lily that she was safe, that the truth she was revealing had a guardian in him. Lily's small frame trembled, tears streaming freely now. Her voice was almost a whisper, but each word cut through the courtroom like glass. "Mama, she told Ranger to run so he would get help, and I didn't know what to do." The audience sat in stunned silence. Even reporters paused mid-scribble, captivated by the raw emotional power of a child recounting trauma with the help of a police dog. The scene felt surreal, cinematic, and unbearably human. Mark Durnell's face was ashen. He shifted, mouth opening to speak, but Ranger's growl, deep and controlled, froze him in place. The courtroom felt the weight of judgment not merely in the law, but in instinct, in truth, in memory made tangible. Lily's small fingers trembled as she pointed directly at him. He lied. Gasps erupted. Even seasoned courtroom personnel instinctively leaned forward. Mark's hands trembled on the table. Ranger growled again, low and deliberate, as if confirming every word, every accusation. Judge Reynolds cleared his throat, voice steady but tinged with awe. The court will note the child's statements, and the dog's response will be entered as evidence regarding behavioral indicators and witness corroboration. Proceed. Lily exhaled shakily, gripping Ranger's fur. Her tiny voice, firm despite fear and grief, added the final, chilling note of Part 5. And he's lying right now. The courtroom froze. Everyone knew in that suspended moment that nothing in this case would ever be the same. The child, the dog, and the memory of that night had converged into a truth impossible to deny. The courtroom was electric with anticipation, a tense hum that vibrated through the walls. Every person present, jurors, reporters, officers, and even the judge, sat on the edge of their seats. Lily Hart, fragile yet resolute, clutched Ranger's fur with tiny hands, leaning into the dog as if drawing courage from his calm, commanding presence. Ranger, alert and focused, sat beside her, muscles coiled, tail low but tense. His amber eyes never left Mark Durnell. Every inch of his being radiated memory, instinct, and judgment, a living, breathing testament to the night no one else could fully remember. Officer Daniels whispered to Ranger, voice low and steady, "She's telling the truth, boy. Stay with her." Ranger's ears twitched in acknowledgement. He understood. He had tracked, observed, and remembered the crime, and now he was here to silently confirm what Lily could not yet fully articulate. Lily's small lips quivered. Tears had streaked down her cheeks, but her gaze was unwavering, fixed on the man responsible for the chaos that had shattered her life. She drew a shaky breath, voice barely above a whisper, but carrying a weight far beyond her age. He hurt Mama," she said, trembling. "And she tried to stop him. She tried to push him, but he wouldn't stop." The room exhaled collectively. Jurors shifted in their seats, unable to tear their eyes away. Reporters scribbled frantically, trying to capture every word. Even the judge, experienced in decades of courtroom drama, leaned forward, pale, the gravity of the moment pressing down on him. Mark Durnell's face had turned a ghostly shade of gray. His hands clenched the table edges, knuckles white. His lips parted, then closed, then parted again as though trying to form words that wouldn't come. The visible tremor in his hands betrayed a growing panic, a recognition that the walls of his carefully constructed deception were closing in. Officer Daniels spoke softly, almost reverently, "Ranger, stay calm but keep the alert." The German shepherd shifted slightly, moving to stand fully between Lily and Mark, a silent barricade. His gaze locked on the defendant, steady and unwavering, an unspoken message that no falsehood could pass while he was present. Claire Benson leaned forward, eyes wide. "Lily, can you tell us what happened next?" Her voice was gentle but insistent, careful not to scare the child, yet urging her to speak the truth that had been hidden for so long. Lily inhaled deeply, small shoulders trembling. Her voice, fragile but gaining strength, began to recount what had transpired that fateful night. He made me go in the car. I couldn't see Mama. She tried to get out, but he pulled her back. Ranger tried to stop him, but he wouldn't let go. Ranger, he bit him." A hush fell over the room. Even the scribbling of pens seemed to stop. The combined weight of a child's recollection and the dog's instincts had created a reality too vivid to ignore. Ranger growled softly, a low, deliberate sound that reinforced every word. Mark Durnell shifted uneasily. His face was pale, sweat glistening along his hairline. He tried to speak, to deny, but Ranger's presence, coiled like a living lie detector, silenced him instantly. The German shepherd's gaze was unyielding, commanding truth where human witnesses had faltered. The judge's gavel struck sharply. Order! His voice was firm, though his expression betrayed disbelief. The child is testifying. Let the testimony continue. Lily's small hands gripped Ranger's fur tighter. She leaned slightly forward, whispering words that seemed to carry the memory itself into the room. Mama, she told Ranger to run, to get help, and I stayed in the car. I didn't know what to do. Gasps swept through the courtroom. Jurors exchanged tense glances, grappling with the shocking clarity of a 3-year-old's account. Reporters scribbled frantically, capturing every detail. Even seasoned courtroom staff seemed momentarily paralyzed by the intensity of the moment. Mark Durnell's face was a mask of panic. He shifted again, jaw tight, hands trembling on the table. Ranger's growl deepened, low and deliberate, a sound that resonated with the authority of truth itself. Officer Daniels knelt beside Ranger, whispering, "Good boy, hold steady. Let her finish." Ranger leaned slightly into Lily, a silent reassurance as if saying, "We will get through this. Your voice matters." Lily drew in a shaky breath. He hurt Mama again. She fell. And I couldn't move. Her words hung in the room, fragile yet devastating. The jurors leaned forward. Some gasped audibly. Claire Benson scribbled notes furiously, understanding the gravity of each phrase. Ranger's body remained taut, a living affirmation of Lily's testimony. The dog's alert was not random. It was confirmation of her memory, a silent witness that spoke without words. Mark Durnell's attorney whispered urgently, "Your Honor, this is unprecedented. The dog." Judge Reynolds raised his hand. "Silence. The child is recounting the events. The dog's response is part of the evidence. Proceed." Lily's small frame shivered, but she pressed on. "Ranger," he tried again. He bit him. "Mama," she told him to run, so he could get help." The courtroom collectively exhaled. Even the reporters seemed to pause, struck by the courage of a child and the instincts of a dog revealing a narrative too vivid to ignore. Ranger, muscles coiled and body tense, remained fully alert, a living conduit of memory and truth. Mark Durnell's panic escalated. His breathing was ragged. He opened his mouth to speak, but Ranger's growl, deliberate and resonant, silenced him. The courtroom felt the weight of judgment, not merely in law, but in instinct, in memory made tangible. Lily's voice, small but unwavering, continued. I saw him hurting Mama. Ranger, he tried to stop him. He wouldn't leave her. And I didn't know what to do." The judge leaned forward, face pale. "This court will note the child's testimony, and the dog's reaction will be entered as evidence regarding behavioral cues and corroboration. Proceed." Officer Daniels whispered softly to Ranger, "You're doing great, let her finish." Ranger leaned slightly, reassuring, his amber eyes warm yet intense, fully aligned with Lily. Lily's small finger trembled as she pointed at Mark. He's lying." The room collectively gasped. Mark Durnell's hands shook visibly. Ranger growled again, low, deliberate, unyielding. Every subtle twitch of the dog, every careful positioning, reinforced the child's account. Claire Benson's voice trembled slightly as she whispered, "This is the strongest form of testimony I've ever seen, child and dog together." Lily's tiny voice, now steady with growing courage, added the final chilling note of Part 6. "And he's lying right now." The courtroom froze. Every gaze focused on the child, the dog, and the man whose lies were unraveling before them. The combined truth of Lily's memory and Ranger's instincts had transformed the proceedings into something more than legal testimony. It was a revelation, raw and undeniable. Mark Durnell's composure crumbled entirely. His face was pale, jaw tight, hands trembling on the table. Ranger, alert and protective, remained a living barrier between Lily and him, a sentinel of truth and courage. The air was thick with anticipation. Everyone understood that the defendant's unraveling had begun. The child, the dog, and the memory of that night had converged into an unassailable truth. The courtroom was a furnace of tension. Every person present seemed to hold their breath, waiting for a truth they could almost feel but not yet fully hear. The combination of Lily Hart's testimony and Ranger's vigilant presence had transformed the room into something far beyond a legal proceeding. It was a stage for raw, unfiltered confrontation between innocence and guilt. Lily, pale and trembling, clutched Ranger's fur. Her voice, though small, had grown steadier, rising above the whispers of disbelief. Her tiny frame exuded courage that defied her age, powered by the silent support of the German shepherd at her side. Ranger, alert and coiled like a spring, remained directly between Lily and Mark Durnell, every muscle primed, every eye fixed. His low growl resonated like a warning, as if the dog itself carried the memory of the night of Emily Hart's disappearance. Mark Durnell, 32, once composed and self-assured, now appeared hollowed out. Sweat beaded on his forehead, hands trembled on the polished table, and every attempt to speak seemed swallowed by the invisible force pressing down on him. Lily's words, Ranger's instinct, the courtroom's collective awareness. Officer Daniels whispered quietly to Ranger, "Stay, let her lead. We've got this." Ranger's ears flicked, acknowledging the command, a silent promise to protect the truth no matter what. Lily's small lips quivered as she spoke, voice barely above a whisper. He hurt Mama. I saw it." A collective gasp filled the room. The jury leaned forward as one, captivated, horrified, unable to look away. Claire Benson, the prosecutor, felt her heart hammering in her chest. The child was recounting events with a precision that was impossible to deny, reinforced by Ranger's unmistakable behavioral cues. Mark's face was pale, jaw tight. He opened his mouth to speak, to interject, but Ranger's growl stopped him before he could form a single word. The dog's amber eyes were unwavering, almost intelligent in their judgment, a silent sentinel bearing witness. Lily continued, voice gaining strength. Ranger, he tried to stop him, but he wouldn't stop hurting Mama. I couldn't help her. The room was frozen in silence. Every reporter's pen paused mid-strike, every juror's breath caught in their chest. The gravity of a child recounting trauma with a living, trained witness beside her was almost unbearable. Mark shifted in his seat, eyes darting to Ranger, then to Lily, panic etched into his every feature. This is ridiculous," he stammered, voice cracking despite his efforts to maintain composure. "This dog, this child, this isn't evidence." Ranger's growl deepened, low and deliberate, vibrating through the polished courtroom floor. He leaned slightly forward, positioning himself as a barrier, not aggressive but unyielding. It was a silent judgment. Truth cannot be escaped. The judge pounded the gavel. "Order." His voice carried authority, but his eyes betrayed astonishment. "The child is speaking. The dog's response is part of the proceedings. Silence in the court." Mark's hands trembled uncontrollably. He tried to adjust his posture, to regain control, but every movement seemed to reinforce the narrative forming before him, a narrative he could no longer manipulate. Lily took a shaky breath. He tried to stop Ranger. He grabbed me." The courtroom gasped. The simplicity of her words belied the terror, the horror, and the truth they contained. Ranger's low growl underscored the statement, confirming every detail. The dog's body language was precise, deliberate, an undeniable corroboration of the child's memory. Claire leaned forward. "Lily, can you tell us what happened next?" Her voice was gentle but insistent. The child's voice trembled, but determination shone through. "Mama," she told Ranger to get help, so he ran, and then I stayed there. I didn't know what to do. The courtroom exhaled collectively. Every juror's eyes were wide, some even shifting nervously in their seats. Reporters scribbled furiously, capturing every word. Even the bailiffs exchanged glances, uneasy with the intensity of what they were witnessing. Mark Durnell's face drained of color, his jaw tightened, lips trembling. This is a lie," he shouted, desperation overtaking composure. Ranger growled, low and resonant, each vibration of sound a clear warning. The German shepherd shifted slightly, moving so that every movement reinforced Lily's position. It was as if the dog was physically embodying the truth she spoke. Officer Daniels whispered, calm but firm, "Let her finish, she knows what happened." Ranger's tail flicked once, a subtle signal of support, his amber eyes unwavering. Lily's tiny frame trembled, tears streaking her cheeks, yet she pressed on. He didn't stop. He hurt Mama. And then he tried to hurt me too." The words sliced through the courtroom like a knife. Mark Durnell's hands gripped the edges of the table. He opened his mouth to speak but faltered, unable to form coherent words. Ranger's growl intensified slightly, warning, protective, in perfect synchrony with the child's account. Claire leaned in, whispering almost to herself, "This is the strongest corroboration I've ever seen. The child and the dog together telling the truth." The judge's voice cut through the tension. "Mark Durnell, you will remain silent unless addressed by the court. You are in contempt if you interrupt." Mark's breathing was shallow. His composure was cracking. The courtroom felt the raw edge of impending confession. Lily's small finger pointed directly at him, trembling but firm. He's lying," she whispered, voice unwavering despite fear and tears. Ranger let out a low, deliberate growl, reinforcing every accusation. Every muscle in his body was coiled, attentive, and impossibly aware of the unfolding truth. The audience could feel the tension like electricity in the air. Mark's hands shook violently, sweat poured down his forehead. His mouth opened and closed, desperation overtaking logic. Finally, his voice cracked, small and defeated. I didn't mean to," he stammered, words faltering as he tried to regain control. But the weight of the child's memory and the dog's instinct was undeniable. Ranger took a subtle step closer, standing firm yet calm, amber eyes locked on the man. It was as if the dog himself were demanding honesty, forcing the defendant to confront his own actions. Lily whispered again, voice gaining strength. "Ranger bite hand, he hurt Mama, and he's lying now." The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Every juror, every reporter, every officer and staff member felt the enormity of what was happening. The child and the dog together were revealing a truth that no one could ignore. Mark Durnell's face crumpled, his jaw slackened, his hands shook violently. His composure, his lies, his arrogance, all of it had shattered. Ranger's presence, his growls, his unyielding gaze had stripped away every layer of pretense. Judge Reynolds leaned forward, voice low and commanding. "This court acknowledges the gravity of the testimony. We will proceed with caution, but the child's testimony and the dog's behavioral cues are undeniable." Lily exhaled shakily, resting against Ranger. Her tiny voice, barely audible, carried the final note of Part 7. "And he can't lie anymore." The courtroom froze, the weight of that declaration settling like a stone. Mark Durnell's shoulders slumped, his entire body surrendering to the undeniable truth. Ranger remained a vigilant guardian, amber eyes burning with loyalty and justice, while the child who had found her voice clung to the one creature who had never let her feel unsafe. The room seemed to exhale collectively, though tension remained thick. Every person present knew the defendant's unraveling had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The courtroom was suffused with a tense, almost unbearable silence. Every person present, Jurors, reporters, officers, even the judge, sat frozen, eyes locked on the improbable duo that had rewritten the story of the trial. Lily Hart, trembling but resolute, clutched Ranger's fur, her small fingers sinking into the soft sable coat. Every heartbeat she felt echoed in the polished courtroom floor, a rhythm matched by the dog's poised, taut muscles beside her. Ranger, vigilant and commanding, remained directly between Lily and Mark Darnell, amber eyes unwavering, tail low but tense. His growls, low and deliberate, vibrated through the room, a living, breathing affirmation of the child's recollection. He had witnessed the events that had shattered a family, and he now carried the memory into the courtroom as tangible, undeniable truth. Mark Darnell's composure had completely crumbled. His once confident posture was slumped, hands trembling on the polished oak table. His eyes darted wildly from Lily to Ranger and back, desperate for some reprieve from the suffocating weight of his guilt. Sweat streamed down his forehead, and his lips parted in a futile attempt to speak, but no words came. Ranger's unwavering gaze silenced him with the force of instinct and memory. The judge, Reynolds, leaned forward, face pale but resolute. "Mr. Darnell," he said, voice firm, echoing in the hushed courtroom, "you are under oath. The child has provided testimony. The dog's behavior has corroborated her account. You will speak or the court will proceed accordingly." Mark swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing as he struggled. He opened his mouth, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't mean I." Ranger's growl deepened, low and deliberate. The sound seemed to anchor the courtroom, pressing Mark into a corner where truth was the only path. The dog's stance was immovable, a silent declaration that deception had no place here. Lily, tiny yet unwavering, pointed directly at him. You hurt Mama." The words hit like a hammer. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Jurors leaned forward, faces pale. Reporters scribbled furiously. The air was charged with disbelief and awe. Mark's shoulders slumped. The thin veneer of control shattered completely. He glanced at Ranger, then at Lily, and for the first time a shadow of remorse flickered across his face. His voice broke, raw and trembling. I didn't mean to." She fell. Ranger shifted slightly, moving closer to Lily, muscles coiled yet controlled. He was the living embodiment of her courage, reinforcing every word and every accusation. His amber eyes never left Mark, holding him accountable in a way that no human witness could. Lily's small voice rose again, clear and unwavering. "Ranger, he's lying." The courtroom exhaled collectively. Even the judge leaned back slightly, taking in the extraordinary convergence of child testimony and canine instinct. Mark's hands shook violently. His face was pale and ashen. The room felt the electric charge of imminent revelation, a truth that could no longer be denied. Officer Daniels whispered softly to Ranger, kneeling beside the dog, "Steady, let her finish. We've got this." Ranger's tail flicked once, a subtle signal of reassurance. He was patient, vigilant, ready to affirm Lily's memory with unflinching precision. Claire Benson, the prosecutor, leaned forward, whispering to her assistant, eyes wide with disbelief and excitement. "This is beyond anything I've ever witnessed. The child and the dog are together, exposing the truth in real time." Mark's composure crumbled completely. His breathing was ragged. He tried to form words to defend himself, but Ranger's unyielding presence and Lily's unwavering accusation pressed him into a corner with no escape. He sank into his chair, finally voicing a confession that trembled out of him like a breaking dam. I hurt her. I didn't mean to, I lost control, The words were halting, fragmented, but they carried the undeniable weight of guilt. Ranger's growl softened slightly, a subtle acknowledgement that the truth had been revealed. His gaze remained fixed on Mark, warning him, yet allowing justice to finally take shape. Lily's tiny hands gripped Ranger's fur, tears streaming freely now. You hurt Mama and you lied to everyone." Mark buried his face in his hands. the courtroom silent but for the faint rustle of papers and the soft sniffles of a child finally speaking her truth. The jurors were motionless, stunned by the magnitude of the confession delivered in tandem by a 3-year-old girl and a dog trained to detect fear, deception, and trauma. The judge's gavel struck sharply. The court acknowledges the confession. The testimony of the child and the behavioral cues of the dog will be entered into the record. The defendant will remain in custody pending further proceedings. Officer Daniels exhaled slowly, hands resting on Ranger. The dog's tail flicked once, calm now but alert, a silent guardian who had stood steadfast through the storm of memory and emotion. Lily leaned against him, small head resting on his shoulder, finding comfort in the only being who had never let her feel unsafe. Claire Benson wiped tears from her eyes, glancing at the child. "You were very brave, Lily. Very, very brave." Lily sniffled, small shoulders trembling. "Ranger helped me, I was scared." Ranger nuzzled her gently, a living reassurance. His presence had been unwavering, a bridge between trauma and courage, a conduit for memory and truth that no human could replicate. The courtroom slowly exhaled, the tension easing but leaving a lingering awe. Spectators, officers, and jurors alike recognized the extraordinary nature of what had unfolded. A child, silenced by trauma for months, had found her voice through the loyalty and instincts of a German shepherd. The courtroom had witnessed a truth so raw, so immediate, that it transcended ordinary proceedings. Mark Durnell remained slumped in his seat, hands trembling, the weight of guilt pressing down on him like an unyielding force. His lies, his control, and his arrogance had all been stripped away by a combination of innocence and instinct. Judge Reynolds leaned forward, voice calm but firm. This court recognizes the bravery of the witness and the invaluable role of the canine in corroborating this testimony. Justice is not always straightforward, but truth has a way of revealing itself. The room remained hushed as Lily slowly sat back, tiny fingers brushing Ranger's fur. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Good boy, we did it." Ranger nuzzled her gently, a quiet, affirming gesture. For months, he had carried the memory of a night no human could forget, bridging the gap between trauma and justice. Together, they had exposed the truth, protecting the innocent and holding the guilty accountable. The cameras flashed, capturing the extraordinary moment. A child and a dog, standing against fear, silence, and deception, altering the course of justice forever. Reporters would write about it, jurors would recount it, and the courtroom would never forget the day a 3-year-old girl and her loyal German shepherd unraveled a crime that had long remained hidden. Lily finally looked at Ranger, voice barely above a whisper but filled with relief. "Thank you for helping Mama." Ranger rested his head on her lap, calm, steady, a silent hero. The courtroom felt the weight of closure. Justice had begun, but more importantly, a child had found her voice, and a dog had carried the memory of a night filled with fear and courage into the light. The judge banged the gavel one last time. Court is adjourned, but let this day remind us that courage and truth can come from the most unexpected places. The courtroom slowly emptied, leaving behind an indelible image. A tiny girl and a German shepherd, bound by trust, bravery, and the unshakable pursuit of justice.